When I think about this tutorial and what I want you to walk away from, the most important thing is going to be how to manage highlights on glass. It's the world of polarization, how to effectively manage light. Let's talk a little bit about glass first. Glass is complicated. If I hold up this beer glass here to the light, you can see every light that we have in the studio. It's reflected all over this glass, right? You see absolutely every single highlight. You see it in a couple of places too. It's not that you just see the light on one side, it's actually transmitting and it's coming through onto the other side. And another thing you have to keep in mind about glass, it's actually 4 surfaces. You've got the outer edge and the inner edge. The thickness of the glass actually produces 2 surfaces. Now double that for the other side, you wind up with 4 surfaces where light's hitting. That can be difficult to manage. When I look at images by other photographers, I can quickly tell if they know what they're doing in terms of management of highlight, or if they're just kind of entering the market and they're a little bit of a rookie. It definitely separates the pros from the amateurs. Understanding light and how to manage highlights is the critical component to beverage and beer photography, period. So let's now kind of dive into understanding polarizers. We're going to give you a bunch of information. We're going to give you some video demos, we're going to give you some graphics, and even some additional articles to read so you can really understand the physics and the technical side of polarization and how it works. But let me first kind of try to put it into just more simplistic kind of layman terms about what's happening. So when we think about light, we think about light coming as rays or waves into our eye or into the camera lens. But it's not that simple. Light wave is actually a vibration. You have to think of the atoms that are inside of a light ray as vibrating. They're going horizontally, they're going vertically, they're moving in space. So it's not just that it's a simple light ray coming towards you, it's actually vibrating. It's those vibrations, that extra movement of the light that is really causing the glare that's problematic for us. By using polarizers properly, we can manage those highlights. So how does a polarizer really work? I'm going to use a picket fence as an analogy. I saw this somewhere and I think it's a nice little analogy. If you were to hold a picket fence up in front of you, you would have a slat of wood blocking light, followed by an open space allowing light to come in, another slat, and so on for the length of the picket fence. So it's cutting out a significant portion of that vibrating light. It's cutting out some of that extraneous stuff that's hard for us to really manage with either our eye or our camera. You can also think about this in terms of polarized lenses when you're putting on a pair of sunglasses. When you put on a pair of polarized sunglasses, you're like, oh wow, I can really see clearly. It's because it's blocking that extraneous light that's causing that additional glare and vibration in your eye. Same thing is happening. So I take that picket fence, I'm cutting out some of that vibration, and as I rotate it, I'm selecting what part of that vibrating light I want to eliminate or I want to cut out. By moving it, I'm changing what part of the light is being blocked and what part of the light is coming into my eye or into my lens. That's like the most simple way that I can kind of explain it in what's layman's terms. Let's take a look at polarizers. So I've got this system that I use. I've been using it for a long time. It's the Lee filter system. And it's composed of a couple different elements. First I have the compendium hood. This is really nice. It just attaches with a ring, and it allows me to put it on the camera and then I can spin it. I can also slide my polarizing filter in there. So this is a square 4x4 inch polarizer. It's a really nice piece of glass. It's optic. One thing that's really important, you've got to have good glass in front of your glass. If you've got a great lens and you put a really cheap, terrible polarizer, you're really diminishing the quality of the lens. This is a couple $100, but I promise you, this is a couple $100 that's well spent. Simply slides into my compendium hood. What's also nice about the compendium hood is it allows me to block extra light coming in from the edges. I can actually open up these gates and I can extend my hood, which is going to allow me to cut additional light coming in and reduce glare into the lens, because flare is never fun. So that's essentially how I get the polarizer onto my lens, put it on the front, and I'm able to rotate it. Now, what is happening when I rotate that polarizer? Well, I want you to also think about this as if your set was a sphere. Think about it as a round object. And with that polarizer, you want to slice through that round object and eliminate a section, a plane of light. That's a really basic look at how a polarizer is working. As you rotate it, you're changing where on that sphere you're slicing through and eliminating a plane of light. So there are two types of polarizers. There's linear and there's circular. So what's the difference? Think of a linear polarizer as knocking down a single plane of light. A circular polarizer is different. It has what's called a quarter backplate. It's a couple of pieces of glass that are sandwiched together and they're in opposition, and it's done so to allow some light through. And that's done because DSLRs need the additional light to come through for the autofocus and for the metering systems to work. If you're using a linear polarizer on your DSLR, you can actually knock out all of that plane of light, which is going to cause function errors when it comes to metering and autofocus. So when you're using a DSLR, it's important to use a circular polarizer. In studio, however, it's not as important because I'm not doing metering. I know what my lights are. I know where they're set, so I understand that power ratio. And I'm not using autofocus. I'm doing everything on manual. So I can get away with a linear polarizer in the studio. I've been using them for a very long time, and I'm just very, very comfortable with them. So that's the two kind of basic differences between linear and circular polarizers. I think one way that I've been able to set myself apart as a photographer is I don't just use a polarizer on the camera, I do it on the lights as well. So I use a series of polarizing gels. These are very simple gels. Remember, these are not optical whatsoever. If you put it in front of your glass, you're going to mess up the quality of your focus. It's just not going to work because it's not optical. But these are really nice gels, and I can put them on any modifier I have. When I rotate this polarizer in conjunction with the polarizer on the lens, I'm able to almost completely, if not completely, kill a highlight. It can go away utterly, which is amazing. There are highlights I simply do not want. So if I have a polarizer on my light source, once I've set the polarizer that's on the lens to the scene, I can rotate the polarizing gel on my light source until that highlight is either diminished or goes away completely. That gives me control. I want to control my highlights. That's one of the things you've got to remember in beverage photography. It's controlling the highlights. Where do you want those highlights? Because glass is reflective. You want some of it there, but you don't want it to wreak havoc on your images. Polarizing the lights is a huge step forward and should really make a difference in your photography.